Thank you for joining us for Dialogue on Public Issues. I'm John Channing with Campbellsville University, and today I'm very pleased to be hosting a well-known public official in our community and region and a frequent guest on our show, the Honorable James Comer, United States Representative, or Congressman, as we frequently call him. Welcome, sir.
Good to be back.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Tell us how things are going.
Well, I think things are going well, despite what certain media outlets will report. I think there's a lot that's been accomplished in Washington in the last 2.5 years in the time that I've been there. We've really focused on reducing the regulatory burden. We focused on reducing taxes with the goal of trying to create a strong economy. And I think that we have a strong economy now, despite some challenges that lie ahead with respect to the trade war with China and things like that. But overall, I think that we've really focused on the economy, and that's usually the most important issue with most Americans.
That seems to be the driving issue in most periods of history, isn't it?
If you poll people, whether they're liberal or conservative, if they live in an urban area or rural area, and you say, what are your top 3 issues? The economy is always going to be one of the top 3. Yeah. So that's what we focused on, and moving forward, we certainly need to finalize a new trade agreement with China, but we also need to reduce out-of-control spending, and that's been the big failure of the last 2.5 years, in my opinion, is to try to rein in unnecessary spending.
We've seen extended period of growth. We've seen record levels of employment. Do you see any real troubling signs on the horizon going into the 2020 election cycle?
I do. With respect to employment, it seems like we're almost at maximum employment. I know being from a small community, I'm from Monroe, you're from Cumberland, we know everyone, we know people that aren't working. Those people that aren't working, probably that's their choice not to work. The biggest challenge that I hear from the employers throughout my district and throughout America is they can't find workers.
Exactly.
So one of the things that's going to impede growth moving forward is if you're a big employer and you want to risk additional capital to expand your business, you're not going to expand your business if you're not confident you can hire the new workers that you're going to need. So a lot of people, despite the strong economy, aren't expanding their business now because they can't find workers. And that's a challenge moving forward.
This is one of the longest periods of sustained economic growth in American history, at least in modern American history. Are there signs of recession on the horizon, possible recessionary signs? A definite recession. The economy's cyclical, and there will always be cycles of growth and cycles of recessionary periods. The 2 big challenges that face the economy today are, as I mentioned earlier, the shortage of workers, number one. Number 2 is the trade war with China. And if you look, 2 big industries in my congressional district, agriculture and automotive parts manufacturing, both of those industries are facing considerable challenges due to the Chinese market being cut off. The supply chain for the automotive parts manufacturers has been disrupted with the tariffs, and I think that most people realize this is something that needed to be addressed. We've kicked the can down the road for 2 decades with China. Presidents in both parties, whether it was both Bushes or Clinton and Obama, they've talked about China. They've talked about China cheating, manipulating their currency, stealing our intellectual property, disregarding our patents, no environmental laws, no child labor laws, anything they can do to be, have a competitive advantage over the United States. And yet the United States has, at the end of the day, done nothing about it. President Trump is actually standing up to China. We knew that would be tough. The president knew that probably wasn't the most politically advantageous position to take, but he campaigned on that promise, and he's fulfilling the promise to try to renegotiate a deal with China. And it's tough. It's tough because China's a bigger country than the United States. China, honestly, is in better financial shape than the United States. So it's proven to be very, very difficult, but I think we're making progress, and I think at the end of the day, despite the short-term pain, we're going to see long-term gain, because if we're going to enhance and revitalize the rural communities, which is pretty much the first congressional district of
Right,
Kentucky,
right.
we're going to have good paying manufacturing jobs. And we're not going to get those good paying manufacturing jobs in small town America if we don't have a level playing field with China.
What part of the agricultural economy is suffering the most from the trade war with China?
Without doubt, the soybean market, which was substantial in Kentucky, and probably 80% of the soybeans in Kentucky ended up on a cargo ship going towards the Asian markets. You have one soybean processor in the state, that's Owensboro Grain. Everything else would end up on rail or somehow at a port on the Ohio or Mississippi rivers and go down to New Orleans and end up on container. That whole market's been cut off. So if you travel the state, you have farms like mine that have both grain bins full of soybeans. So the soybean crop last year was never sold.
Right.
So you have challenges with just about every agriculture commodity because of China, but nothing was more devastating than China because China was such a big market for soybeans. And it's not like they put tariffs on the soybeans. They completely quit buying American soybeans.
So how do those farmers survive? I mean, in some can, but
Yeah.
then a lot of them
Yeah.
are from year to year.
Well, last year's crop's still
Right.
in question. This year, a lot of people, and I use my farm as an example, we didn't plant soybeans. Usually we plant half soybeans, half corn. We went all corn this year, and we've received a blessing to us at the expense of people in the Midwest with the flooding in the Corn Belt. Over half those farmers haven't even been able to get their corn crops out. So you've seen in the last few weeks, corn prices have gone up more. And we thought corn prices would go down because everybody was going to be planting corn instead of soybeans. But we've been blessed in Kentucky. We got our corn out, and it's doing really well despite the excessive rain and cooler temperatures. I think that we could end up okay at the end of the day. But still, we've got to have a trade agreement with China that allows reentry of the soybeans, and that's one of the biggest priorities for Trump is to get that soybean market back.
Is there any evidence as we do this interview in mid-June of relief that President Xi may be and President Trump may be coming to terms? I mean, we know what we see in the media, but the media tends to pick up the hype,
Right.
The negative hype. Is there any indication that we're nearing an agreement?
There's no indication that we're nearing an agreement. You have both countries are starting to feel the pain of the trade war. Both countries are led by very strong, proud leaders that don't want to give in. So I think you're going to continue to see hardline negotiations from both sides moving forward. We knew this would be difficult, but at the end of the day, I think it's something that was necessary because Warren Buffett is a lot more liberal than people would realize, but he's without doubt one of the most successful investors in the history of America. He has said oftentimes we can't outsource everything in the United States. We have to make some things in the United States, and the trend was going. Everything was made in China. Whether the clothes you wear, the everything in your house, all the stuff that you buy, your household durable goods, your necessary purchases, the overwhelming majority were being produced in China. And we have to get some of that manufacturing back to the United States. And if we don't have a level playing field with China and renegotiate our trade agreement, then we're going to continue to see everything we buy outsourced and those new jobs being created in China.
It will begin to cause some consumer discomfort, won't it?
Yes.
In America, as consumer prices begin to go up at products at the Dollar General stores and Walmarts and so on.
And you're starting to see that. I read a report, refrigerators, the price of refrigerators had gone up 25%. I mean, you're starting to see major appliances and other durable goods. You're starting to see inflationary potential there because of the tariffs. So, but at the same time, the Chinese economy, which you really can't get a good picture because it's a communist country and they report their own data. By all accounts, the growth has significantly stalled in China. So by all indications, headed towards a recession. And they haven't had a recession in the last decade. They haven't felt anything but enormous growth and prosperity. So I think that, if you watch the news, you're starting to see a little bit of civil unrest in China,
Right.
which doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the economy right now. But I think that as the economy starts to get worse there, the people are going to start to demand that their leaders do something about it.
Well, the entire Chinese economy and political regime is predicated on retaining authoritarian control, but providing some consumer comfort and economic opportunity and so on. They've been growing something like 6 to 10%. And a couple of years ago, I read something that they might dip below 8%, and that was a problem.
Right. Well, they're below 8% now.
Yeah, so-
and I think that if they even had a period where they had no growth, which happens when you have a recession,
sure.
I think that you would start seeing those leaders even more anxious to try to negotiate a deal with Trump.
China is a major competitor and even, I would say, a threat to America long term, both economically. And I just read an article over the weekend in terms of their space plans. President Trump has been talking about a space, military space department in addition to the others, and Space Force. And some, denigrate that. And we can debate whether we need it or not, above and beyond what we already have with NASA and the Air Force. But China is ahead of us in that regard.
They are, and there are a lot of people that worry about privacy with drones. If China has satellites everywhere, drones aren't a problem.
Exactly.
It's the satellites that can zoom in and really invade your privacy and disrupt the whole telecommunications industry. So I do think that despite the fact that the liberal media has made fun of the president wanting to create a space force, I do think that we need to ensure that China's not creating a situation to where they can completely disrupt our entire telecommunications industry in the United States. So we have to, we protect the seas, we protect our land, we have a superior Air Force, obviously. We can't forget about space and the threat of satellites and any type of missile defense system that they could be putting in the air there. So it's something that we certainly need to look at in the United States, and the president is.
Yeah, they could bring down our entire GPS system,
They could.
and the communication system with lasers and so forth.
Exactly. They could.
In our satellite system,
They
people
could.
don't realize that, how dependent we are.
And I don't think a lot of these kids know what a map is,
Right.
so I don't know that they could get around without a GPS.
What's the status of the new U.S.-Mexico Canada trade agreement?
Well, the deal's been finalized with the leaders of Mexico, Canada, and the United States. The problem is it hasn't been ratified by Congress yet.
Right.
And I think that it's the votes are there. It's whether or not Pelosi will let it be voted on. I almost think Pelosi has to let it be voted on. I've volunteered to work with as a liaison between the White House and Congress. There are about 10 of us trying to get the bill. I've met with moderate Democrats that I know are in districts where they have agriculture and automotive manufacturing, and those industries need the USMCA, Mexico-Canada agreement. So the votes are there. It's just a political posturing right now between Pelosi and Trump for it to come up for a vote. But I feel pretty confident that she will have to let that come up for a vote. When that comes up for a vote, it should get, it takes 218 votes to pass the House. I would say that would get 275, 280 votes, and it'll get over 60 votes in the Senate too.
Now, you've been an advocate of limiting wasteful spending, reducing debt, reducing the deficit. It seems that the deficit is growing.
Yes.
Our national debt is growing. I think it's 22 trillion or some ballpark figure thereof. What can be done? Are we going to get serious about controlling spending and begin to even trim the debt a little bit?
I've been there 2.5 years, and I can report to you with confidence neither party seems very serious about controlling spending. They may talk about it. They may come home to a town hall and talk about it, but they're not doing anything about it. I think that obviously the first step, you're going to have to require it. to be balanced. If you don't pass a balanced budget amendment to the
That
Constitution,
was my next question, if that's the only way.
they're not going to do it. I can tell you, neither party. I'll criticize the Republican Party. They've done nothing. The majority. Now, some of us are there. I'm friends with Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows. There's some very serious fiscal at Thomas Massey in Northern Kentucky. Very, very serious about reducing spending. But at the end of the day, the majority of the party leadership's not. And it's immoral what we're doing to our children and grandchildren. If you want to make it the law, then you will see Congress have to abide by the law. They're always talking about, well, he hasn't read the Constitution or he's not abiding by the Constitution. It needs to be in the Constitution to balance the budget. If our forefathers had ever dreamed that Congress would continue to spend more money than they took in, they would have written in the Constitution, in my opinion, oh, and by the way, you have to balance the budget at the end of each year. It was just common sense to those men, I'm sure, that you can't spend more money than you take in. But the federal government has been able to do that. Both parties have done that over the last 4 decades, and there's no end in sight. So what I've proposed and supported when we vote on budgets is mandatory across-the-board spending. Say, we'll do 3% across the board. That would balance the budget. You have 12 different cabinets. And the president has cabinet secretaries he got from the private sector for the most part that were successful in business. Well, they've had experience in, trying to show a profit and trying to have a lean budget. That's what they're going to have to do. We can't say, all right, Department of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue, the Secretary of Agriculture, you're going to have to cut this program 14% and this program 2%, and we're going to increase this program 5%. You're just going to have to say, all right, you're going to have to cut your budget 3%.
Yeah.
You do it, whatever. If there's programs that need more money, put more money in them.
Right.
If there's programs that need to be eliminated, eliminate them.
Right.
That's what's going to have to happen. And today, as we speak, I don't have confidence that that's going to happen. But the people in America need to demand that Congress pass a balanced budget amendment.
Can that be achieved, that kind of cut, without touching defense?
It could. There was a proposal last year that Marsha Blackburn in Tennessee had that cut every agency by 2.5% except defense, but it didn't balance the budget, but it came close, and it was a big improvement. So
even a freeze.
Yeah.
I mean, years ago there were proposals on the table by some groups and some congressional representatives to just freeze the spending.
They had that sequestration.
Yeah, and even doing that over a period of time would help.
Right. We significantly increased defense spending last year. So the Defense Department, at the time, Secretary Mattis, I represent Fort Campbell, the leaders at Fort Campbell had to call and said, we've got in Fort Campbell helicopters that are just, they're just sitting here because they need parts. We can't get money for the part. So we put what I hoped was a one-time plump in there to increase their budget to get them caught up. I want to make sure every troop has what they need.
Sure.
If they need body armor, they better have body armor. If we need a part to get these Black Hawk helicopters working again at Fort Campbell, then they need the money to do it. But at the end of the day, we can't significantly increase defense spending every year like we did last year. And hopefully we were hoping that extra money would go to make sure that, if there are tanks that need repair, if there are helicopters that need repair, if there are troops that need more body armor, that's what that money was for. So, the question is, how much more money do we need? I tend to think that we have our military stretched thin. I think we're in certain places across the globe that we don't really need to be. I think we have military bases in countries that we really don't need to have military bases in. I think we can significantly consolidate where our military is. And that's something that if you require reduced spending, they're going to have to do, because we spend a lot of money in other countries.
Sure. And that leads into my next series of questions. you're a strong supporter of Israel.
Yes, sir.
Why?
Right.
And why is Israel such a important ally?
Right.
And why is Israel's defense important
Yeah.
to the United States?
Well, I grew up in Sunday school at First Baptist Church in Tompkinsville, and
understand.
my interpretation of the Bible is you need to stand with Israel, and those who stand with Israel will be blessed. That's number one. Number two, if you look at the Middle East, Israel is without a doubt our ally in that area, and probably our only really good ally that I trust. If there's instability in Israel, there's going to be instability everywhere. And if we can protect Israel, that whole region is kind of in check as it can be. So
It's the only real democracy in that area.
it's the only real democracy in that area. I've been to Israel. I spent 2 weeks there 2 years ago. An amazing economy. You can see that they are a blessed nation. I mean, you can see where the property line is. If you stand on top of the Golan Heights, which was in the news recently because Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu named a certain mountain or hill or something after Trump. That was controversial, as you can imagine.
Right.
But you can stand on top of that and look out, and you can see where the property line is because on this side, it's all green. You know, they've got crops growing, there's prosperity. Then right across the line, you know, you can see Jordan, different places. It's not. And but Israel creates stability in the region. If we allow Iran to invade through Lebanon, if we allow Iran to invade Israel, we're going to be involved in World War III, and it's not going to be a good situation. You're going to see problems arise in the United States, and it's just it's imperative that we protect Israel. They're a small country. They have a good missile defense system, but no country in the world is harassed as much as Israel. No country in the world is threatened as much as Israel.
One area of controversy within the American discourse and debate is Saudi Arabia, and related to that is Israel and our relations to Israel, and Saudi Arabia being a nation that is pro-Israel, at least in terms of they might not admit it publicly, but they're aligned with Israel against Iran.
Right.
Yet Saudi Arabia has some issues that are offensive to
Right.
American values. How do we weigh that? And how do we find a balance dealing with Saudi Arabia, and what is Saudi Arabia's value in defending our values against Iran?
Yeah. Well, it's tough. You know, Saudi Arabia has made it very difficult to defend Saudi Arabia in Congress with the actions of the Crown Prince with respect to the journalists in the embassy. You know, Saudi Arabia also, in my opinion, never answered some of the questions with respect to the September the 11th terrorist attacks. So Saudi Arabia is certainly a country that we have to watch, but they're also a country that purchases a lot of things from the United States. I mean, we are reducing our dependence on Saudi Arabian oil every day.
Right.
That's one of the things the president and Congress has been successful in. We're allowing more drilling in the United States, so we don't have to buy their oil. We enrich Saudi Arabia buying oil from them for years and years and years. Because of that, they have bought a lot of our airplanes. They've bought a lot of our missile defense type systems that are produced in the United States, great paying jobs in the United States. But there's also the concern, well, they're buying our military equipment, are they going to use it against us and things like that? So it's something that we have to continue to watch. But at the end of the day, they're a country that now, because we've significantly reduced the amount of oil we're buying, they're probably purchasing a lot more from us. We have a trade surplus, I would assume, with Saudi Arabia now. So that has to factor in it as well. And knowing that Saudi Arabia, they don't want Iran to get any bigger than Iran has already gotten. They're a threat to Saudi Arabia. It's like
jigsaw puzzle in the Middle East. It's always been that way throughout history.
And we're down to 1 minute, but our ships, we're moving ships into the Gulf of Oman. Iranian ships are allegedly, and evidence is they're shooting on tankers moving oil. Are we headed toward a war with Iran?
I hope not. The president shares my belief that it needs to be a very serious situation for us to go into war. But at the same time, I don't think the president needs to show weakness. I think President Obama showed weakness with respect to negotiating with Iran. We had a terrible deal with Iran from President Obama. Trump's not going to go that route. We can't let foreign countries destroy and kill our own people. So I think that the president's going to send a message that, number one, our military is superior to theirs, and we're not going to take it, but I don't think he's going to fire the first missile or anything like that. I hope not.
Congressman, we're out of time.
Thank you,
It's
sir.
always a joy to sit and talk with you, and we appreciate your public service and friendship. And Dr. Carter sends his best regards to you. And I know that all the voters and constituents of the 1st District wish you Godspeed.
Well, thank you, and I love Campbellsville University and look forward to coming back.
All righty. We'll make sure that happens soon.
Right.
This is John Chowning with U.S. Representative James Comer for Dialogue on Public Issues. Thank you.